OCN is pleased once again to work with our partner in Kiev, ATR, to bring you a very special program today, not only with someone who is in the military, but also someone who is in the field of the arts, Taras Kompanichenko. Taras, welcome to the program.
Вітаємо. Добрий вечір.
Hello, good evening, good evening. Good to see you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'm very interested to learn of not only your military, but also your other projects which you're involved in.
Ну,
Well, for many years, I have been involved with ancient music. That is to say, the kind of music which is more to do with Renaissance, Baroque, and the Middle Ages. The music that has come to us through manuals, manuscripts, and different kinds of old print books. My ensemble music band and I sing different church music, different parts of the liturgy that have come to us, descended to us in different ancient collections of music works printed in the church days back in the Middle Ages. Not only liturgical music at that, things that have been preserved to us, written by hand, as well as books printed back in the 18th centuries, different kinds of anthologies and collections that contained music starting with the 16th century and all the way to the 18th century for quite some time also. For more than 30 years, actually. I have been exploring and performing epic Ukrainian traditional music, typical of different musical instruments, played and performed by people that would play the bandura, the lira. These were the people played primarily back in those days who were blind. They would travel around Ukraine and they would sing different kinds of heroic songs. This was an epic tradition typical of the east of Europe. And we had this tradition handed down basically without any kind of pauses all the time through Stalin's time. And then there was a terror, huge terror, where a lot of these people were simply killed. And some of these people, passed on this tradition as teachers, and they passed on this tradition to some other people all the way to the 1980s. So this is where I borrowed this tradition. I also compose my own songs, poetic verses, music, and stylistically and aesthetically, I would say, this has embraced and it continues this tradition in many ways.
Okay, all right.
The tradition of the Ukrainian epic tradition, something that Kobzar musicians used to perform centuries and centuries ago, but we do it in a neo-epic way together with my band. We usually perform chamber concerts of high Baroque style, in the style of the Gabrieli brothers. If you have heard, this was the Italian school, dated to the 16th century. So we sing something which has come down to us once again primarily in manuscripts.
Okay.
This was a high style, pervasive in the Ukrainian land back at the time. A lot of romanticism, also works of the 20th century. This year we won the Shevchenko Artistic Prize in the name of Taras Shevchenko for the songs that the Ukrainians created 100 years ago when they were fighting for their independence. At the time, which was called the Ukrainian Revolution and the Liberation War for the Ukrainian Popular National Republic, which started in 1918 and continued through 1921. These are choir works accompanied with the piano and different kinds of marching music. This is very high style, the music created by outstanding Ukrainian composers and with the lyrics created by the outstanding Ukrainian poets. So it's a combination of different styles. You see both modern and ancient, old, So I'm very much into Ukrainian music in the European and world context. I also play such musical instruments as lute, renaissance, lira, the bandura, different kinds of banduras. I have two banduras standing next to me, dating back to different periods, different tiles. And I'm learning also to play the Baroque lutnia. It's a kind of a
Well,
guitar of
you are
Renaissance time.
you are very talented indeed. My goodness gracious.
На
Taras, clearly you are a professional musician. I only play two instruments, the guitar and the piano. You play instruments that are from another century altogether. But how, in what you're doing now in music, which is clearly in your veins, let's put it that way, how does music transfer in to you? You spoke about the heroics, you talk about the heroes of Ukraine. How does music affect the heart? How is music able to uplift the person during this very, very difficult time for everyone in Ukraine?
Ну,
Well, music is so varied, is so diverse. Various kinds of music can be heard right now from loudspeakers. I would say this is very sincere music and sincere poetry being created right now. Finds its reflection, let's put it this way. On the one hand, it is being composed and affects different circles of the society in one way or another, to a certain extent. Symphonic music is being created, very interesting indeed, very modern, and it's very much compliant with the imagery, the emotional states and mental states that Ukrainians are going through at the moment. And in a way, this is the emanation of the spirit that reflects all of our cumulative feelings and experiences. In a way, I would say it mirrors the spirit of the nation. On the other hand, we have a lot of expressions of rap, rock, and pop music. In one way or another, on the one hand, these are the reflections of the creators who are living in our society, being affected by what's going on. And on the other hand, it's filling the niches, and it is addressed to the recipients or the addressees who want to hear one style or another. There are some things that are trying to attempting to become universal for all. They're appealing with everyone. The music that can be heard and understood and perceived by everyone. So the texts and the lyrics can also be perceived by everyone. My point is that undoubtedly my experience, once again, I can only speak from my background. I have been invited and I found myself in the army the third day after the full-scale invasion was launched. I tried to be enlisted on the first day, but you see, I have the so-called white ticket, which means that because of the condition of my health, I shouldn't be conscripted or enlisted. But I tried to do my best to be enlisted, and I couldn't. And some of my friends told me right from the start, it's enough that you will be playing musical instruments. You will be doing exactly what you were doing all the time. You will be online. You will be broadcasted via different social media on YouTube channels, for example. And they said that I should perform all of these songs in order to lift up the spirits. But I said I have no moral right to stay away, because throughout all of my life, I have been fighting for the Ukrainian culture to make sure that it takes up its rightful place in Ukraine. Because once again, in Ukraine, previously there was a huge influence of the imperial Moscow style, and Moscow used to use the so-called humanitarian channels and culture inclusive in order to rid Ukraine of its national characteristics and thus to assimilate Ukrainians. Therefore, my fight was very much in the area of culture, to make sure that Ukrainians would enjoy and exercise their identity. And at the time when Moscow propagandists used to say that there is no such a thing as Ukraine, that Austrian general staff came up with something like Ukraine, that the Polish gentry came up with the idea of Ukraine. So my
Really?
counter arguments were artifacts of our cultural legacy and heritage. And I would say to them here, look, this is the 11th century, this is the 15th century, the 17th or the 18th or the 20th century, which makes Ukraine so distinctly different.
Yeah.
So this was all to support and maintain the spirit, and for those who were looking for the arguments, because naturally all of those Moscow or Russian narratives were not effective with thinking people in Ukraine. However, still, those narratives of the Moscow propaganda, in many ways, I would say they were absurd. But still, they would take effect with the people who were not deeply rooted in the Ukrainian world, due to the circumstances that on television and on the radio there was not so much propaganda of the Ukrainian national style, because the people, many people grew in the east of Ukraine, where the space since early childhood, particularly in urban areas. I wouldn't be speaking about rural areas, but in many towns and cities, Ukrainian spirit was not dominant. So my struggle, even before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, was for the cultural identity of Ukraine, to make sure that the citizens of Ukraine who had not discovered Ukraine for themselves, for them to be able to lean upon something that we call our treasure trove of Ukrainian culture, so that we could firmly say to our enemies in their face, yes, we have always been here. So when the war started, its escalation began to step up. At first, it was not quite clear how the situation would turn out, whether we would win or lose. Everything was precarious. I still wanted to be in the fold of those men and women who were holding weapons, because I was ready to take up arms and fight for something that I have been always fighting for, the independent Ukraine, modern Ukraine, so to say, the dignified land of mine. For me, it was a question, so what can I do to help the cause? People would tell me, that's enough what you're doing, keep singing and this will inspire people. But I said, well, I have no this moral right, no entitlement. If I go somewhere to the west of Ukraine, to the Carpathians, to Bavaria, or somewhere in Poland, for example, and I will just be sitting idle on my hands in the mountains or in the forests and just singing, hey, hey, guys, keep fighting for your freedom, while I'm sitting here quietly and peacefully.
Okay.
I thought I couldn't do this. This was not ethical from my perspective. And I said that unless I had arms in my hands, I couldn't sing.
No, that's
And
not.
so I ended up in the army.
That's
And there was even an episode when I was told, we cannot give you any arms. It's enough that you are singing and playing. And they said, you're an iPhone. Oh, you're an Apple, iTunes. And you know, we are not using these telephones to nail down some things, right? Like hammers. And I said, no, I cannot put up with such a treatment. And there was this episode when I went to one of the military units and I began to play a newly created song about the war. I composed that war in the first days of that song. In the first days of the war, it took me a couple of days to create that song. And I played a small concert between the sessions because the boys and the girls were learning technical medicine to help them know how to help each other with the first aid. So they had half an hour break. So in between these sessions of technical medicine, I performed the first concert. It was one of the first concerts. It was so important for me because many people were recognizing me. Many people said, "Oh gosh, that's wonderful, you're with us. So we feel everything will be okay because you're with us. Oh, sing this, sing that," because they knew my repertoire. Some at least did. And this is how the first concert was performed.
And let me ask you a question.
Я
Let me ask you a
Так.
question,
Так.
Taras. Clearly, you speak about composition of the creation. Now, I know of a different kind of creation, which is when the archangel came to Mother of God and said to her in her heart, "You will bear a son, and he will be called the Christ." That message went through the ear to the Panagia, to the Mother of God's heart. And I'm wondering, as you now are a composer and clearly someone who is specialized in your field, what is it that is important to convey through music to touch people's hearts? As you said, you were giving this concert for young people who are going to war and they're saying it's enough, just sing, just sing. But what, maybe one or two words, don't go long, but one or two words that you think are important to convey to the ear, to the heart?
Безперечно, віру.
Of course, it's faith. We have to convey, we have to be able to convey this fortitude of spirit, that this spirit is above all. At first, everybody was singing about Bayraktars and javelins, the machinery provided by the West. But my song, the first song that I created, was that the spirit gets much stronger when we have the weapons to protect us, but for the spirit, this is the most important thing. We cannot have the confidence in the victory, and the spirit that lives in all of us is the most crucial thing. This is something that needs to be set on fire. Via ears, we have to convey to the people this confidence that we are struggling for fair and just things. We are struggling and protecting our values, and we are protecting our nearest and dearest. So we need to provide the right motivation that we are fighting on the side of righteousness. We have taken up arms not just to kill someone. We have taken arms rather to protect and defend out of love. In other words, we have to provide this proper motivation why we're doing that, so that people can hear it with their ears. And music is something that gives wings to ideas. And music is all about ideas and notions. And if these are words that are given wings, they go down to the heart much faster and they get assimilated much better. And another important point, it seems to me, for all of us, for our case, lies in the fact that when I play, for example, some works dated back to the 15th century, or let's say the 12th century, for instance, as old as that, imagine that. Especially if we talk about early modern music, I'm not even referring to the Dark Ages, because it's a separate story in their own ethics. But when we refer to the 17th and 18th centuries, or the songs which are 100 years old, when you sing them, something that I want to convey is that my brothers and sisters perceive the ideas that we are fighting for, they're the same as our forefathers and ancestors used to fight for. They're very simple: fraternity, love, freedom, fighting for the right to remain yourself in your own land. Very simple things indeed. And this provides certain kind of foundation, solid foundation, that we are not the first ones, we're not breaking the ground, but we are just continuing the heroic tradition of our forefathers, ancestors, who have passed on to us these pure flags, unblemished and unspotted, with some not dignified actions, that the people keep carrying these flags that they have no right to disgrace. This is it.
Taras, thank you very much for being with us today. Taras Kompanichenko from Kiev. And we pray for you. We pray for your music. We pray that you will continue to uplift the spirit of the people in your country. And I hope our partners at ATR will post some of the music, maybe some links to some of the music that you have. So when people hear this and see this interview, they will also be inspired. God bless you, Taras.